Okay, before we begin on our next topic, I want to review keeping things in different folders, because this is something that people seem to have a question about, and takes a little time to get it and understand it. I'll try to incorporate that into other examples that we have as well. There's a couple ways that you can give the path to a image or to a web page. This talks about images, this page, but it's also true about links to web pages as well. First thing that they show is called an absolute path. An absolute path is the entire web address. For example, this image is W3 HTTPS W3 schools images picture.jpg. As a rule, you should not do this unless it's your picture on your website that you're pointing to. That's called a hot link, and you can really get burned if you hot link, because that happened actually to a political campaign. A political campaign hot link to an image on a different site, and the owner of the image actually changed the image, and it was kind of embarrassing for the political figure who had hot link to the image, because the image all of a sudden changed on their website. So as a rule, don't do this. Now, this is okay if you're creating a link. So keep in mind that this is one case where it's a little bit different for links than it is for images. Another thing you can do is you can do this. If it's in a folder off of your website's root, that's sort of another form of the absolute address. This is the way that I would prefer, though. All right. In this case, we say it is in the folder called images that is located in the current folder. So if your web page was in a folder, if this was the case, there'd be a folder in that other folder called images, and your image would be contained in that folder. Finally, if you do .. that means go up a folder and look for a folder called images. It's best to use relative paths if possible. So in other words, this is the best way to do it. I think it's going to be worthwhile for me to create a actual example of this to illustrate this, because I'm not satisfied with just the text on this page. So let me create a web page. So I'll put the regular things that are on every web page. The first example we're going to have is where the image is in the same folder as the web page. And we're going to use LCCC's logo for this. So let me put this in a folder . And I'm going to call it root. Now, we don't talk too much about servers in this class. We can if you want to. We'll probably talk about that in a little bit today. But we'll call this root because this is considered to be the web server's root directory. You typically put all the files in the root directory or in folders within the root directory. So let me go and save this on the desktop. And I'll call it index.html. All right, let me pull down LC's logo. I'm just going to right mouse on this. I'm going to say save image as in here, and it's lccc-logo.png. PNG is one of the types of images that browsers support. So this is in the same folder as the web page. See, there's the web page, there's the image. So if I save this and view this page, there's the logo. Now, with web pages, oftentimes you have, with websites rather, oftentimes you have many files, and sometimes it's a good idea to organize them by putting them into folders. In fact, most of the time it's a good idea to organize them by putting them into folders. So what you might do is you might create an images folder and put the image in there. So if we do that, this doesn't work, and it displays the alternate text. All right. How do we correct that? Well, we go into our code and type in images/lccc-logo.png. And we can see the page again. What if our web page is in a different folder? Then it's a matter of how to get there from here. We're in pages, we have to go up a folder, then down to images. Going up a folder is represented by the two dots. So we go up a folder, then down to images, and then that's where our page is. So if we save that, then it does not work. What did I do wrong? Oh. I have two copies of it. That's one thing that does cause students trouble sometimes if they have multiple copies of their pages, because things don't work. So my suggestion is do your best to keep only one copy of the page. If you need to make a backup copy of your page, like let's say you're going to make some changes to it and you want to keep the earlier version, what I would suggest is making a backup folder that's clearly labeled backup. Okay, now this will work. He says confidently. Oh, I'll bet you I edited the other one. Yes, I did. So now it will work. If it doesn't, I'm just going home. It does. All right. So again, if you're in a folder, a folder that is on the same level as your images folder, you have to go up first to the root or to the other folder and then go down to images. I can help you if you're having problems with this. That's an issue that many people had on their portfolio. In fact, yeah, a really high percentage of people had it on the portfolio. A lot of you did a decent job on the portfolio, but the links weren't right. So a big part of that assignment is getting the links correct. All right. How do I create a website? Let's Google it. In fact, let's not Google it that way. Let's go to ChatGPT. ChatGPT is a artificial intelligence. That's sort of like the next level of searching on the internet. Oh, it's at capacity right now. We can't use it. Shoot. I guess we'll get back to plain old Googling. All right, this looks pretty decent. It is an advertisement for something, but let's not look at this one. It's an ad. I think most of these are going to be ads. Oh, here we go. It's from PC Magazine. I'm not finding what I'm looking for, so I'll make my own list. I'll go into Word. First thing that you have to do is choose a domain name. Now, what is a domain name? That is www. whatever your website is called. So the domain name for Google is www.google.com. So there's organizations that manage that, and you can register your domain for, you can get deals on it through web hosting companies for only, $15 a year, $5 a year, depends on the web hosting company that you go to. But you'd want to choose something that is short enough to be remembered by people and easily communicated. So if I was going to create a website for myself, I wouldn't make it michael-l-zellers.com. All right, that is too confusing because people might forget the dashes or use an underscore or whatever. But just something pithy like mikezellers.com, I think that would work a lot better. So something that's memorable, something that isn't confusing is your best bet. Something short if possible. You can almost tell how long a company has been on the web based on how short their URL is. All right. Like Hewlett Packard, I think, is hp.com. Well, they've been on the web quite a while because they scored that domain. So you choose a domain name. There's not just .coms. There are .nets, .gov, .edu, and there's probably a few more that I'm not, well, there are several more that I'm not thinking of. .coms are typically the least expensive ones. You're not able to register a .gov domain, obviously, unless you are a government entity or doing a website for a government entity. Likewise with an edu. But typically for the websites most people would do, they would do a .com, maybe a .net. All right. Second thing. Find some way, some place to host your files. Web hosting is, you can do that through a company, or you can do it yourself. It's kind of rare for a company to do their own web hosting. It's much more common for you to hire or subscribe to a web hosting service. Web hosting is where your files will live. All right. And web hosting just takes care of things like putting patches to the server in case there's security bugs or things like that. Backing up your files, I believe a lot of web hosting companies do, and so on. You'd have to check with the specific web hosting company. But web hosting is where you're going to put your files so that they're available on the web. In order for files to be available on the web, they need to be contained on a company. They need to be contained on a computer that is connected to the web and running a piece of software called a web server. I draw this diagram in almost all my classes. You have your client, which are people surfing the internet. You have the internet, which is represented as a cloud. And then you have a computer on the other end that is your host that is running a web server, and your files go on this web server. So a web server is simply a program that is listening for certain requests. Your domain name is what causes that request for your website to go to your web host. This internet, within the internet, there is what's called a DNS, a domain name server, and that is what connects your URL or your domain name to a particular server. And it does it by translating your name to what's called the host's IP address, which is numeric. It's three-digit numbers, each one between 0 and 256. All right, so you type in www.mywebsite.com or whatever your URL is. It makes it to the internet through the host. Your host will be running web server software that is waiting for requests that come in. And based on those requests, it will move and send those files through the internet back to the client. So the third thing that you have to do to set up your website is transfer your web pages, your CSS files, your images, and any other files to the host. That is often done through a program called FTP. So your machine that you're developing on will connect through the internet and will use FTP to put the files in the web server root. About the only thing I forgot to mention here is when you choose your web hosting, an IP address will get assigned to your domain. And the DNS servers will be updated. You actually access the website by the IP address, but since those are clunky and hard for people to remember, you have a domain name, and that gets translated to the IP address. All right, that's it in a nutshell. Next topic I want to talk about is web accessibility. All right, what do I mean by accessibility? I specifically mean making your website so that people with different abilities and disabilities can use it. So let's think about this. What are some possible disabilities that can affect the way that someone accesses a website? Well, one is vision. All right. And when I talk about disabilities related to vision, we're running the whole gamut. Obviously, at the very extreme end, there's people that are blind, people that can't see at all. And they want to be able to access the web too. Now, at first, it might seem impossible for them to access the web, but there is what is called assistive technology, which is technology that allows people with disabilities to access websites. And one thing that is available on computers is what is called a screen reader. And the screen reader narrates the page to someone that is visually impaired. And if you hear a demonstration of this, it might seem like it's pretty difficult. Well, yes, it is a little bit difficult, but at least it makes accessing a web page possible. Now, there's some default accessibility programs in Windows and the Mac and in other operating systems, but you can also buy premium ones. I'm going to we're going to spend a minute looking at some of them that are by default in Windows. One thing that you can do, and this would obviously would not be for people that are blind because this wouldn't help them, but for people that are merely have very poor vision, you can make the text bigger. All right, doesn't really do anything on this web page, but you can make text bigger. Or you can zoom in on everything. There we zoomed in and we've made everything, including that web page, bigger. Make everything brighter. All right, those are some basic things for people that have problems with their vision, but are not completely blind. Other things that you can do, you can have a magnifier. And with a magnifier, again, as you move things around the screen, it magnifies what you're seeing. I was a disc jockey for WOBC in Oberlin, and the person that was on after me had very, very poor vision, and they used a screen magnifier to get around the screen and to be able to do what they needed to do. There are color filters. This is for people that are colorblind, all right? If you're colorblind, you might not be able to distinguish between certain colors. One thing you can do is use filters like high contrast filter or other filters that will make it easier for people that are colorblind. Not sure why this isn't allowing me to select these. Oh, I have to turn color filters on. So it could show it in monochromatic. It could show it if you have red-green color blindness. Two different forms of red-green color blindness or blue-yellow color blindness. Now for people, all these are for people that have issues with their vision, although not necessarily are completely colorblind. For people that are not necessarily completely blind, I mean, this includes colorblind people. But there is a screen narrator that will actually read the screen to you. And I'm gonna hope this works, and I hope you can hear it across WebEx, but I'm gonna turn the narrator on. And we're gonna go to Elsie's webpage, and we're gonna hear the screen being read to us, if all this works.
Narrator dialog, close, button, Alt+C. Narrator touch requires a touch screen that supports 4-finger input. Narrator touch is not available, but you can continue using narrator with the keyboard and mouse. Press the spacebar to continue.
Okay, so the narrator read that alert box that popped up.
Okay, button, Alt+O, heads up. Narrator heading level 1, scan. Welcome to narrator. This is narrator home, where you can get help, access your settings, and learn about new features. Narrator is a screen reader that...
Okay, let's go to a web page.
You can turn to LCCC to launch your career. Lorain County Community College has finished loading. Link. Skip to content.
This allows someone with visual impaired to skip all these navigation links and get to the main content of the page.
Lorain County Community College logo.
Okay, for images, it will read the alt text. That's why it's important to put alt text on this. I'm merely hitting the tab key because, of course, if you are blind, you cannot use a mouse.
The index, link, faculty/staff, link, connect, link, my campus, link, canvas.
So if I wanted to access this, I would hit the space bar. So with the narrator, you can access everything by using combination of keys. And I'm not an expert using narrator, but I can at least navigate around a little bit. Now you might think this is so difficult. Let's hit
search for, edit, scan off.
Okay, we can go and actually search for something.
Space.
Let's go. Let's say we wanted to search for something.
Scan off.
Okay, let's say I wanted to search for CISS.
S space CISS216.
16. I hit tab, hit space.
You searched for Admissions and enrollment has finished loading. Banner, link, Lorain County Community College logo, link, AZ Index, link, faculty/link, connect, link, My Campus, link, Canvas, search for, and search, main menu, link, getting started, link, academics, link, student resource, link, campus live.
Now, this sounds like this would be kind of a pain to navigate, but again, if you were blind, you would really have no other choice but to do this. I was a summer faculty fellow at the NASA Glenn Center in Cleveland, and my office mate for that period of time was a blind high school student, and they did everything that an intern was required to do, such as create PowerPoint presentations, create Excel worksheets, create Word documents by using screen readers just like this.
Link, search results for CISS216 group. Link, Tech Cred. Link, Associate of Arts electives.
Okay, so this shows you all that. Now, I'm going to turn this off.
Narrator, exiting narrator.
Okay, so those are examples of assistive technology that help people that have vision problems. There's two things that allow people with disabilities to access your page well. And one is assistive technology. And the second is applying universal design principles. So, for example, if I was developing a website and I wanted to make it so that people that had visual issues were able to access it, what are some things I might do? Well, I would include alt text for any images that I had. That would be one thing. I would use color schemes where the colors weren't really close to each other. So, for example, I might not, I would not use a blue text on a black page. And I've seen people do that, and that's difficult for me, and I'm not colorblind. So you might think some of these things are common sense until you realize that, well, there are people that do make these mistakes. So keep this in the back of your mind. If you're going to use color, make sure that you're using color that is contrasting. All right. Do your best to keep your pages simple. The screen reader works much better when there are simple pages as opposed to complicated pages. All right. Keep plenty of space between words so the words don't all run together for people with different visual problems. Use a clear font so it's not confusing for people to read. One of the key points of universal design is keeping things simple. It's very rare that I will look at a student's page and tell them, hey, that's too simple. Most often what makes web pages hard to access is that they're too complicated. So keep that in mind. How can I simplify this? How can I streamline this? And the thing is that's going to benefit everyone. It's not just going to benefit people that are visually impaired. It's going to benefit anyone that's accessing your site. A second way that you can help people through universal design is having multiple presentations. All right, what do I mean by that? Well, let's talk about another disability, hearing. Now you might think the web is a visual medium. You know, it shouldn't really matter much if you don't have hearing. Well, it does if you're looking at videos or looking at audio of a web page. All right. So if you're watching a video, person that's can't hear or is hard of hearing is going to have a hard time. Well, is not going to be able to unless they can lip read or something like that. One thing that you can do is you can provide captions to the videos. All right. And by providing captions to the videos, a person that is visually impaired can, the person that is hearing impaired can get the understanding of what's going on in the video. Another thing that you could do instead of captions is just have a text version of the script. All right. So if there's a news story, you might have the video. All right. And you might have the same content in text so that a person has a choice of reading the text or watching the video. Now that may benefit people all this benefits people who are not just visually impaired or audio impaired. For example, if there's a news story that I'm interested in and there's a 5-minute video, well, I'm a real fast reader, okay? So if there's a text version of the story, I can scan through it and get the meaning of what's going on in the story a lot quicker than watching a 5-minute video, more than likely. So I could scan through the story and maybe then decide if I want to view the entire video or not. Other disabilities, people that have motion control issues, motor control issues. There's a number of neurological conditions that keep people from being able to navigate a mouse, particularly on a web page. There's carpal tunnel, which makes it difficult and painful for people to access content on a web page. One thing you can do to help those is make it accessible via, make the content of your page accessible via keyboard as well. As you notice, as I'm hitting the tab key, it's moving around these links. And I could hit space if I wanted to follow one of those links. There we go. Make sure the links aren't too close to each other. So someone that maybe has hands that shake a little bit won't have a hard time pointing at the particular link that they're interested in. So don't make the links tiny little things, all right? Make them big enough so that someone can easily find them, and put space between them so that person doesn't necessarily accidentally click on the wrong link. Where I have that problem, having kind of big hands and big fingers, is on mobile pages. Sometimes on mobile pages, the links are just too close together and I try to click on one thing and I end up clicking the link that's next to it. So by putting adequate space between them, it can make it easier. How do you put space between things? Well, we've studied that, right? You use a margin. So by putting maybe a margin between the links, or other kinds of things, padding or other things like that, we can allow space between that. There are other sort of neurological and other sort of disorders that include things like epilepsy. One thing that you can do for people with epilepsy is to avoid a flashing screen. Certain animations and certain screen flashing effects can actually trigger seizures in people. So you want to avoid it for that reason. But you know what else? Even people that don't have epilepsy are often annoyed by the flashing and find it distracting. Someone with ADHD might be distracted by something that's flashing on the page and cause them to lose focus. So what's it come down to? Keep it simple. All right. Some of these effects are fun to put into web pages, but do they really add value to the web pages or not? Now keep in mind, I'm not saying, well, because there's some people that can't hear, don't have any video on your sites, or because there's some people that can't see, don't have video on your sites. What I'm saying is if you have video on your sites, make sure that you're presenting that content a couple different ways so that someone with a disability can still get the meaning from the content that you're putting in via a video or an animation or other techniques like that. Finally, older people may not have drastic incidents of these particular disabilities, but they may be affected in all of these categories. All right, I can speak on that because I'm a bit older. All right, vision. Well, I'm not blind, but I don't see very well. I don't see as well as I used to. And if text is particularly small on the screen, I have a hard time reading it. Or if you don't use good color contrast, I have a hard time reading it. All right, I'm not deaf, but my hearing isn't as sharp as it used to be. And therefore, if you have captions, it really helps me. I watch TV at home with captions on for that very reason. I don't always catch what people are saying, especially if the show goes quiet or quieter for a minute. And having captions on allows me to read that. I may not have carpal tunnel or other neurological ailments that causes motor control issues, but it's still difficult for me to click on a very small place and so on. So therefore, really, when you're developing a site that's accessible, you're doing it for all these people, and people without disabilities can benefit as well. Now we're going to look next week about forms. All right, forms is where you are allowed to, where you're able to enter data that you're going to send to a web server to be processed. All right, there's things that you can do. There's specific HTML code that you can put in your form to make it easier for someone using a screen reader, for example. So far, my advice to you would be keep it simple and present things multiple ways. Use a simple color scheme. You know, if you can't think of a better color scheme, black and white always works. All right, with maybe another color that's contrasting. All right, this is basically a black and white page with a little bit of blue to contrast it, to give it some visual appeal. I'm not telling you not to use any of the techniques that you have learned as far as making colors and all that. I'm saying do it with awareness of the fact of that some people accessing your site may have disabilities and may have a hard time accessing it if you don't make a clear contrast between colors. Another thing to do is don't only use colors to indicate something. If you have a warning, for example, on your web page, all right, you might think, oh, well, I'll make the warning in red text. Well, that's a good idea, except people with certain color blindness won't be able to notice and detect the red text. All right, it won't stand out for them. But you could do something else that would make it stand out. Make it bold and red. So if I had, let's pretend this was a web page. If I had a warning, I might think, well, Let's make it red. Well, people are colorblind aren't going to see that as red. How will they see it? They'll see it like that, right? So what can you do? Well, make it red and bold, or in italics. All right. Now, if you're not colorblind, you'll see this. You'll see the text in red and it's bold and it's in italics. So you'll really notice it. If you are colorblind, however, you'll still be able to tell that this is supposed to stand out just because it is bold and in italics. We'll be talking more about accessibility and specific things that you could do as we get into forms and tables throughout the rest of the class. All right, that's all I had for today. I will see you all next week, or if you need to see me in lab, either stop by physically or come to WebEx.